Okay, we're going to get started. So good morning and welcome to today's Funding New Jersey Brownfields webinar brought to you by the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, the only center of its kind providing free services to brownfield communities in New Jersey. My name is Sean Vroom and I'm the director of the Assistance Center, and I will be moderating today's webinar. The goal of today's webinar is to provide participants with an overview of potential funding sources available to both the private and public sector in New Jersey for brownfields planning, assessment, and remediation. One of the biggest challenges in brownfields cleanup and redevelopment process is securing the funding to reach your goals and having a solid understanding of what funding resources are available. You need to know when they're available, what phases of the brownfield redevelopment process they're applicable, and this is very critical for success. We're by no means are we going to discuss all the funding sources available to New Jersey entities for the brownfields cleanup and redevelopment process, but we're going to cover some of the primary sources that can serve as the foundational funding for a brownfields project in the state. So to discuss those funding resources, we have a great lineup of speakers today. I'll be kicking off the presentation by covering EPA's MARC Brownfield grants. Then we're going to hear from Melissa Dolinsky of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, who's going to be covering the soon-to-be-launched Brownfields Impact Fund. She'll be followed by Rachel Stopper of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, who will provide an overview of its Hazardous Discharge Site Remediation Fund, more commonly referred to as HDSRF. And then last but not least, we're going to hear from David Zimmer of the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, who's going to be discussing the New Jersey Water Bank funding source. So once all the presentations are finished, we'll have the questions and answer portion of the webinar. And before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. Everyone is going to be muted during the presentations. If you see that you are not muted, please do mute yourself. Please submit questions via the Q&A pane, not the chat pane. And you can submit your questions anytime during the webinar. And like I said, we'll go through them at the end of the presentations. The Q&A pane should be available at a menu, either the bottom center or bottom right of your screen. And finally, recording of the webinar, as well as a copy of the presentation, will be made available on the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center's website. So if you want to be able to go back and reference it. I'd also ask, it's not up on the slide, but if at the end of this you will receive a post-event survey, I ask that if you could take the time, it's not a very long survey, fill out the questions to the best of your ability. It really does help us improve as well as hone in on some of the topics that you want to hear about, and the quality of the educational forms that we're able to present to you. So I'd ask that you do that. So planning for, assessing, cleaning up and redeveloping your brownfield sites comes with a cost. And most county, municipal and tribal governments and nonprofits do not have the funds to cover all of those costs. And it's important to promote private sector interest for successful projects. So it's really important to know where to find funding, how to secure it, and how to apply it to your project. Brownfield projects are funded by multiple sources that may include grants, loans, and tax incentives, just to name a few. The key to successfully funding a brownfields project is the ability to bundle those multiple sources, which is commonly referred to as the funding stack. So creating this funding stack goes well beyond simply identifying funding sources. It requires a project vision, as well as solid planning to ensure that those funding resources are brought to bear at the appropriate place and time. And what I mean by that is that brownfield projects are somewhat linear in nature, and you develop a vision. You develop a vision goal or your goal, and then you lay out the tasks you need to achieve that vision or goal. So in simple terms, you plan, you assess, you remediate, then redevelop your brownfield. And the various funding resources that you have identified most likely will be applicable to only a certain phase or task along the way, and only applicable to certain elements of your project, and are available at certain times. So having a solid redevelopment plan is critical to applying funding resources. So as I stated earlier, I'm going to discuss EPA's MARC Brownfield grants, MARC standing for Multi-Purpose Assessment, Revolving Loan, or RLF, and Cleanup. EPA solicits these grants annually, usually in the fall. The solicitation is currently actually underway. It's actually finishing today. Today is the due date for those applications. EPA selects the winners the following spring, so that would be this upcoming spring, and then the applicant has access to the funds the following fall. So basically, it takes 1 year from your application to accessing the funds. So as I mentioned earlier, you can see why planning and timing are extremely important to the redevelopment processes, because this is the only time these MARC grants are available. Entities eligible for these grants include local, county, state, and tribal governments, as well as nonprofits. Some of the grants do require a cost share, which can be in the form of contribution of money. It can be labor, material, or services, and it must be for eligible and allowable costs within the project, which is the scope of your application. So the first grant I'm going to talk about is the multi-purpose grant, and with this grant you can do just about everything. You can do site assessment, you can do site cleanup, you can do various planning activities. This grant is offered in alternating years, so with the RLF grant. So multi-purpose grants are typically available in odd fiscal years, and the RLFs are available in even fiscal years. So this past cycle that we just went through, it was the RLFs that were available. You can get up to $800,000 in funding with this application or with this grant. It's a 5-year performance period, and there is a $40,000 cost share required with that grant. And again, that can be in the form of a contribution of money, labor, material, or services. And again, you can conduct environmental site assessments with this grant. You can carry out cleanup activities on brownfield sites that are owned by you as the applicant. Some of the planning activities that you can conduct with this grant are developing inventories of your brownfield sites. You can prioritize your brownfield sites. You can conduct community involvement and engagement activities. You can develop cleanup plans and reuse plans that are related to brownfield sites, and you can develop an overall plan for revitalization. With this grant, it's required that you conduct at least one phase 2 environmental site assessment with the funding, and you have to do at least one brownfield site cleanup. And if an overall plan for the revitalization of one or more of the brownfield sites, you can conduct that if there isn't one already in place. So that's basically your multi-purpose grant. So moving on to your assessment grants, this grant allows you to conduct site inventories. You can prioritize sites. Again, you can do community outreach and involvement similar to the multi-purpose grant. You can conduct phase 1 and phase 2 assessments, which is the primary goal of this grant. You can do cleanup planning, brownfields planning, and site reuse planning. There are 3 grants that are available underneath this assessment heading. So the first one is the community-wide. That is for where you have a wider target area with multiple brownfield sites. You can request up to $500,000 for this grant. It's 3 years is the performance period. There is no cost share requirement. And there's no cost share requirement with any of the assessment grants. The site-specific assessment grant, that's where you target a single specific brownfield site. You can get the grant applications up to $200,000. You can request a waiver to increase that to $350,000, but you would have to justify why those additional costs are necessary. This also is a 3-year performance period, and as I said, there is no cost share. And then this solicitation was the first time that EPA introduced this new grant. It's called the State and Tribal Community-Wide Grant. So this is like a super community-wide grant. It's available to state and tribal entities. It is up to $2 million, which is quite a bit of money. It has a performance period of 5 years, and again, no cost share. And the idea with this grant, similar to the grants that a coalition assessment grant, which was offered in previous years, which was not offered this year, is that it basically allows for an entity to include entities to assess projects that for those entities that don't have the capacity to manage a brownfields grant. So that's the goal of that grant. So the last one now is I'm sorry, it's not the last one, the revolving loan fund grant. This is the one that was offered this year. This is commonly referred to as the RLF. It provides funding to make low interest loans and or subgrants for cleanup activities at brownfield sites. Again, it alternates with the multi-purpose year as far as its availability, being available on even year fiscal years. You can get up to $1 million for this grant in funding. It's a 5-year performance period, and there is a 20% cost share required with this grant. These grants provide funding to a grant recipient for capitalizing an RLF program. The RLF programs provide loans and subgrants then to eligible entities to carry out cleanup activities at brownfield sites that are contaminated with hazardous substances and or petroleum. And an RLF grant must use 50% or more of the award funds for loans. So you can subgrant out the money, but you have to do at least 50% in loans. And then the final grant I want to talk about is EPA's cleanup grant. Obviously, that supports cleanup activities at a specific site or multiple sites that are owned by the applicant. You must own the site for this one, and you must own the site. Going back to the multi-purpose grant for the cleanup that you have to do, you have to own that site as well. This is for the cleanup grant, you can receive up to $500,000 in funding. It's a 3-year performance period, and with this grant, there is a 20% cost share. So going over just these grants in and of themselves could be a webinar. There's a lot to know about these grants, and there's a ton of resources out there. I do recommend that you go, if you're interested in these grants, you go and visit EPA's website. They are highly competitive. If you are considering applying for these grants, obviously it's too late this go around, but you should begin the process early. And by early, I mean, if you're thinking of applying next fall, you should start the process this spring. And that's because a lot of the information that's required with these grants includes census and health data. You have to identify partners. You want to pull together all the planning work that's been done on a project. You need, if you're going for cleanup or multi-purpose, you need to have site ownership. You need to have conducted some community engagement activities prior, or at least have a plan to do so. And these grants, once the guidelines come out, or the RFA for these grants, you have only 6 weeks to prepare them before they get submitted. So, being able to do all that information within 6 weeks is next to impossible. So you'd have to start this process early. We can certainly, at New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center, help you get started with that grant. We can help you identify what grant would be appropriate. We can critique your grant for you and generally get you moving in the right direction. And again, contact as early as possible if that is something that you are looking to pursue. So that covers EPA's MARC grants. And I just wanted to show you the next slide here. Basically gives you an idea of what activities, who these grants are eligible to. Obviously, it's the public sector, and what phases of the brownfield redevelopment process they're applicable to. So we're gonna, as we go through the presentation today, at the end of each one, we're gonna add X's to this table and let you get a good idea what this funding stack may look like, what is applicable to what activities, what grants, and who is eligible for those grants. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Melissa Dolinsky from New Jersey EDA. Melissa?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So thanks, Sean, for that introduction. And Sean covered a little bit of the revolving loan fund, but I'm going to go into some more details. So as Sean mentioned, my name is I am a senior officer in the Brownfields and Sustainable Systems Group here at the New Jersey. So thank everyone for joining us today. We are the proud recipients of 2 EPA grants, and I'll get into that in a little bit. here to present our new funding program, which is the Brownfields Impact Fund. The Brownfields Impact Fund is supported by a US EPA revolving loan fund grant that the EDA received in 2020. So this morning, I'll give you a brief overview of this upcoming program, and we hope that it will be useful to help fill in some funding gaps for cleaning activities throughout the state. But before I start, I want to let you know that we're really excited to be able to launch this program. I want to thank EPA for selecting us for a grant and being able to bring this funding to our state of New Jersey. So through his comprehensive economic plan for a stronger, fairer economy in New Jersey, Governor Murphy has identified the remediation and redevelopment of brownfield sites as an important component of smart planning that will allow for New Jersey to meet its goals for economic growth. So our hope is that this program can help address those funding gaps for the remediation phase and make projects more financially viable and reactivate long-stalled sites, and we can create jobs through remediation, redevelopment, and then finally the productive reuse of the property. So Sean, next slide, please. So on this slide, you'll see what we're doing here at EDA. Programs and initiatives that our group here at EDA has rolled out, as well as those that we're currently developing and plan to launch here in 2020. So we have a great group of people working here at EDA on brownfields. So now we are able to offer an entire suite of programs for additional investment and resources. And we're able to partner with sister agencies providing technical assistance to community.
Melissa?
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, your audio's kind of fading in and out.
Okay, I'm in
Not
a different
sure.
office, but let me just get closer to my computer. Is that helping or no?
Let's try it. Give it a
Okay,
go.
sorry.
I'll let you know, that's okay.
If my face is very close to the computer now. I can just try to talk louder too because I am in an office. So just let me know if there's any problems. So on an environmental justice, climate change, and community collaborative initiative, better known as CCI, we're able to partner with the DEP. So if you aren't aware of the CCI program, that's a place-based partnership between DEP and EDA that's able to tackle some quality of life issues in New Jersey's most distressed cities. So CCI aligns its interests with those supporting environmental, community revitalization, economic growth, and public health outcomes. So they're doing some great work. We're really happy. If you want to look further into that, I can give you the website and provide that in the chat if anyone's interested. So next up is the Brownfields Assistance Center. So Sean went into the tools and resources that they're able to provide to communities throughout New Jersey in order to help them redevelop brownfields. So feel free to reach out to them. As Sean mentioned, their assistance is always free. So it's a big resource for people to be able to obtain information about grants or different things for brownfields. So you'll see here the Brownfields Loan Program is currently closed, but we have two other programs that are in the works. We have a US EPA Brownfields Assessment Grant that's coming soon in 2022. And something else people are interested in is our Brownfields Redevelopment Tax Credit currently under development. But I am here to talk about the Brownfields Impact Fund. So next slide, please. So you'll see a brief overview of what I'm going to cover today, different eligibility requirements, different things, loan amounts, subgrant amounts, interest fees, etc. So basically, Sean covered this, but this program will be able to provide loans to for-profit companies and loans and/or subgrants to public sector and nonprofit. Slide, please. I have a very general high-level overview of the program here, but like Sean said, this will be provided to everyone, so no need to take notes or get worried that you're missing some of the details. It's all here in this presentation, and it's also available on our website, so I have that link here, njeda.com/Brownfields Impact Fund, and I'll put that in the link. I'll put that link in the chat for everyone too, so they'll be able to look things over at their convenience, kind of go through things and make sure they understand the program and different aspects of the program. So one key thing that I did want to point out and bring to people's attention early in the presentation, I think it's important to let any potential borrowers or subgrantors know that they will be required to comply with the Davis-Bacon Act and New Jersey prevailing wage for the work for which they're being funded under this program. So this general overview, just to reiterate, the EDA will be able to make low interest loans available to for-profit loans and grant-funded nonprofits and local units of government. So for-profit companies are not eligible for grant funding under this program. We will be taking applications on a rolling basis. So again, just to let you know, there's no deadline, there's no due date that this is due. We know how Brownfields projects are evolving, and sometimes they don't work on very specific timelines. So we wanted to make sure that we built that aspect into this for people. The funds will be available and awarded on a first come, first served basis based upon a complete application. So that's our online application along with the documentation and attachments that we need from applicants. And the funds must be used to perform cleanup activities at brownfield sites. And we'll get a little bit more into the eligible activities in a little while. And one last thing, the minimum and maximum loan and subgrants. So loans are 50 to 350K, and then subgrants 25K to 350K. So next slide, please. Sean, is my audio better? I'm trying to just speak louder.
Every now and again it fades.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not an IT expert. I would not know how to fix that. So some applicant eligibility, just to reiterate, I went over this, but I just want to make sure it's clear to people. Loans are to for-profit organizations, loans, subgrants, or both, a loan and a subgrant available to nonprofits and units of local government. And I just want to make sure to put a quick note here that subgrants do not require repayment. So just to explain that a little bit, this money has been granted to us, the EDA, by the EPA, and allow us to subgrant a portion of that money to the eligible applicants under the program. So if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to explain that further. I just want to put that out there for people's information. Next slide, please. So there are site control requirements. So just to briefly go over them, loan applicants must be able to demonstrate site control or path to site control, and they do not need to own the property. Subgrants are a little different. Subgrant applicants must own the brownfield property at the time of application and the award of subgrant, and you must retain ownership of the property through the performance period, and you must consult with us, the EDA, and the EPA prior to transfer. So something you want to think about if you've got a project that you're thinking about and that the funding might be useful for, these requirements are something you want to think about as you're working through what type of funding sources and how you can stack that money. So next slide, please. So this is a general overview of the loan program. So we've structured these loans, they'll be 20-year terms with a 2% interest rate. And then we have an option to decrease that interest rate to 1%. So I'll talk about that in a minute here. And the principal and interest will be deferred till the end of year 4. So 2 things, you'll need to submit a letter of support from the mayor, or if the position of mayor doesn't exist, you'll need from the governing body of the municipality to make sure that the project aligns with what they want to do and the vision that they have for their community. And all applicants must have a redevelopment plan for the property, for the contaminated property. And you'll need to be in good standing with our sister agencies, and you'll need to be able to provide us with a tax clearance certificate, which we can walk you through. and that the funds will be disbursed upon reimbursement of an invoice. So next slide, please. So the rate reduction that I spoke about earlier, these are how we built into the program the rate reduction, 2% to 1%. So we're looking at these in order to achieve our state policy goals, and you'll need to do 2 of these in order to receive that rate reduction. So next slide, please. Subgrant overview. So it's built in a similar way to the loans, a little different. So we have received $800K from the EPA, so we're allowed to subgrant a portion of that. So that's where the subgrants come into play. Again, the letter of support will be needed, the tax clearance certificate, the funds will be reimbursed manner, and the application fee for both the loans, I forgot to mention this before, but the application fee for both the loans and the subgrants is $1,000. Next slide, please. So we're really happy that we're able to build this into our program for subgrant applicants. The EDA will waive that $1,000 application fee upon demonstration by the applicants that the fee would impose undue financial. So the policies and procedures of the program have a provision. So we're using Department of Community Affairs, so DCA, Municipality Revitalization Index, the MRI, to determine municipal distress and evaluate hardship. And then for nonprofits, annual operating budget. So when you come in, you'll let us know that information, and we'll let you know if you qualify for a fee waiver under the policies and procedures as we have them. So next slide, please. So at this point, we're getting into the good stuff and what you can use this money for. So here's some examples. I'm not going to go through them all. It's a long list, but these are some examples of eligible activities that you can use the funding for under this program. And just to reiterate, this is not assessment or investigation money. This is cleanup money. So we've got some different things here. We've got remedial action work plans, engineering remediation caps. We've got site monitoring, and we've got basically all the cleanup activities that you're used to seeing. Capping, excavation, containment. So basically a whole variety of things that can be done at a brownfield site. And with that being said, other uses would be considered by the EPA pending their approval. So if you have a site that you think you're not 100% sure if it's an eligible activity, what you want to do, we would love for you to come in and discuss that with us. We'd love to hear what your plans are, what you're thinking of doing, and we would talk through the site details with you to go over that. So next slide, please. Since this is supported by federal funding, we do have exclusionary criteria. Again, I'm not going to read this, but if you've caused or contributed to the contamination, you're the federal responsible party or have common ownership with the responsible party, or you can't meet the site control requirements or the eligibility requirements, unfortunately, you would not be eligible for this funding source. So next slide, please. So really quickly, some of the ineligible activities. Eligible and ineligible activities, and these are as follows, but in general, they just are things that are not cleanup, associated with the cleanup. So investigation, assessment, construction, demolition, integral to cleanup, and different things, and Superfund sites. So all of these things would not be eligible to receive funding under this program. But again, if you're not sure, or if you're on the fence, or you're thinking you might be eligible, you might not be eligible, we'd love to have you come in and talk to us and see what we can do together. So next slide, please. Some things I just want to wrap up and cover, make sure we all understand that the funding is available on a rolling basis. come, first serve based on a complete application and also the availability of funds. So we want to make sure that people understand that we do have a limited pot of funds and that they're going to go out first come, first serve. We're going to be able to vet the eligibility of the project site. So we have a brief pre-qualification screening form on our website. So we just went live yesterday. So that's available on the website, which is eda.com/Brownfields Impact Fund. We really try to keep it simple and straightforward for all potential applicants. It's 2 pages. It took me, I'd say 5-10 minutes to fill it out. And, there's no obligation or anything, so you can come in, give us your information, but you're not required to complete. I really think it's like a jump off to start understanding what you want to accomplish. So for the first 3 months of the program, so 90 days, you'll be accepting applications from those CCI cities. So it will be limited to those CCI cities. And then after 90 days, we will be accepting applications from programs from areas outside of the CCI cities. So if you aren't sure if you're in a CCI city, you can check the DP's website. That's nj.gov/DP/CCI. I will put that in the chat for you too. Or just reach out to us and we'll let you know. So next slide, please. So like I said earlier, you are going to be required to comply with the prevailing wage for the activities that we're funding under this program. So we can work with them on this. We have a really great and experienced staff here at EDA that can help you with this, can explain the process to you. So we want to encourage you to still come in, even if you aren't sure about those requirements and don't really understand what they entail. We'll be happy to work with you and go through all of that. Next slide, please. So yeah, I just want to again reiterate, we're really excited that this program is launching in early 2022. We're going to be accepting applications for both loans and subgrants. And we can, we're happy to take inquiries from everyone. We have a dedicated email address here on the website. But yeah, thank you very much. If you can just go to the next slide, please. I appreciate your time this morning. My email address is here. I just want to say we're really excited and happy to be able to bring this to our Brownfields community in New Jersey. Feel free to reach out with any questions to me or the team here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Melissa. We appreciate that. Lots of great information. I'm sure there's a lot more. And unfortunately, I had a little bit of audio problems. So if anybody,
I really wish I knew how to fix that.
It's okay. If anybody has any, clarifications that they want to address today, put it into the Q&A pane, and we'll have Melissa go over it again.
Yeah.
And if not, here's her contact information, which I'll also provide at the end of the presentations for people to reach out and get further clarification should they need it. So what I wanted to do again is bring up the table, just again to kind of show you we're building this potential funding stack so you get a good feel for what these funding resources can be used for and who they're available to. So you can see now we've added EDAs, Brownfields Impact Fund, which is available for the remediation portion of the Brownfields redevelopment process. So with that, we're going to now hand this over to Rachel Stopper from New Jersey DEP. Rachel, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Great. Okay. My name is Rachel Stopper, and I'm from the New Jersey DEP. And today we're going to talk about the Hazardous Discharge Site Remediation Fund, or the HDSRF. I am an HDSRF coordinator within the Brownfields office. Next, please. So we're going to start with brownfield sites. So what is a brownfield? We define the brownfields as current or former commercial or industrial sites where operations cannot take place due to real or perceived contamination. And the HDSRF is a grant and loan program that supports brownfield redevelopment by funding assessment, investigation, and remediation of brownfield sites. Next, please. So when you think brownfield, this is what you might think of in your mind, or what you might see in your mind. This is the former Camden Lab site. This was a site. This is a site from our office that's now a recreational area that is enjoyed by the public. So brownfield sites are unattractive. They can be difficult to redevelop. They might be dangerous, or they have a negative image. And again, the HDSRF takes sites like these, and we pay to assess, investigate, and remediate them so that ultimately they can be redeveloped. Next slide, please. Some background on the HDSRF. It was established in 1993, and it is funded through a constitutionally dedicated portion of the New Jersey corporate business tax. And we receive an allocation every summer. We get replenished, and we can usually expect about $10 million. Sometimes it's a lot more, sometimes it's a little bit less, but on average, we can expect about 10 million every year. And we administer the HDSRF program in partnership with the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. So basically, the applications initially come in to the DEP, and we perform an initial technical review. And then after we have completed our review, we prepare a recommendation, which we send to EDA. Once EDA receives our recommendation, they perform the final administrative and financial review. Next, please. If you'd like to read a little bit more about the HDSRF, the DEP defines it in about 20 pages or so in the Brownfield and Contaminated Site Remediation Act. And we actually just had an update to our statute this past August, which I will talk about. The EDA defines the HDSRF in the New Jersey Administrative Code, and they last updated their code, I believe it was this past month. And the Brownfield Act is the statute, and the Administrative Code is the regulation. Next, please. So who's eligible for funding through the HDSRF? Public entities, private entities, and nonprofits. A public entity is defined as a town, county, or redevelopment agency. This is our most popular grant applicants, and there's also the largest variety of grants available to public entities. And in fact, 30% of the HDSRF fund, the entire fund, is allocated specifically for assessment and investigation to public entities, which is by far the top kind of grant that we issue. Private entities are also eligible for funding. These are pretty much anybody else, people, persons, developers, responsible parties, anybody. Also, nonprofits are eligible for HDSRF. You have to be a designated 501c3 in order to be eligible for the nonprofit grant. Next, please. So applying for HDSRF is fairly easy. You can find an app, you can call the HDSRF coordinator and we can send you a copy. You can also go to the website and you can find the application in the forms library on the DEP website. And if you're an LSRP, I'm sure you're very familiar with the forms library. Next, please. So to apply for HDSRF, you fill out the application, and there are some attachments that are also required in addition to the application, which I will talk about. And basically, you take the application and the attachments and you mail them to the DEP, where the mailroom will receive them. They'll then be sent to the Bureau of Case Assignment and Initial Notice, and then the application will find its way to the HDSRF coordinator. At this time, we are accepting applications electronically, so you are welcome to email an HDSRF application to the HDSRF coordinator, but please also mail a copy to DEP as well. The electronic copy to the HDS coordinator cannot be the only copy that DEP has. Next, please. So when the application is received by the HDSRF coordinator, it gets placed on a list and will be reviewed in the order it was received. And the HDSRF statute dictates a review prioritization. So at the top of our list are any IECs or projects that may have, sites that may have an imminent threat to human health and the environment. Next are our brownfield development areas. Next are planning areas 1 and 2, and then everything else. Next, please. So as part of the review, there is an administrative review of the application, pretty much just making sure that everything that you're supposed to submit has been submitted. And then the main part of the review involves a technical review of a scope of work and a corresponding cost estimate. So this is the work that you are asking to be funded through the HDSRF. And what the HDSRF coordinator does is we would approve the scope of work as it relates to the cost. Our priority while we are reviewing these documents is that public funds are being spent responsibly. Next, please. So for the cost estimate, just some information for the cost estimate. Please itemize it and break it down into time and materials. Make it easy for us to understand what you are asking for. Please don't inflate your costs. We've been looking at cost estimates for a very long time, and we'll know if you're doing that. Actually, and if your costs are overly inflated, your application may be denied outright, which is not something that we do very often in the HDSRF group. I think I've done it only once or twice. And also, if there's any question about costs, you can always reach out to the HDSRF coordinator, and we can provide you an example or a template or guidance for cost estimates. Next, please. Okay, so you have your application, you have your scope of work and cost estimate. Another attachment that we require is a municipal resolution, and this is something that may hold up an approval for quite some time. There's very specific language that is required in the resolution, and I'm going to go over that now. So the resolution must be a resolution that authorizes application to the HDSRF. The authorization, that term needs to be in the resolution. Also, the resolution must explain that there is a commitment of the municipality that the property will be redeveloped within a 3-year period after completion of the remediation. If the commitment is not in the resolution, it will not be accepted. And then you can also include other details, the site control, the site designation, what is the end use. You should also include the name, of course, of the property and define it in any way that you can. And the resolution should not be more than 5 years old. A redevelopment plan is not required, but it is something that we might ask as the site gets closer to the remedial investigation or remedial action phase, as those phases can be a little bit more expensive. If you submit a redevelopment plan, that certainly supports that you are committed to redevelopment. Next slide, please. So these are some examples of site control. So yeah, a tax sale certificate is a form of site ownership. The deed, maybe you have purchased the property for the purpose of redevelopment. Foreclosure, or you might even, maybe you don't want to purchase the property until after you've done a preliminary assessment. You can put certain language in your resolution that you will acquire the property through voluntary conveyance for the purpose of redevelopment, and we will accept that. Next, please. So after the DEP has completed their review and we send a recommendation over to EDA, we email our recommendation. The EDA will then ask the applicant for a $500 review fee. The DEP does not have a review fee. And then also EDA will also reach out to the applicant for a tax clearance form, which Melissa talked about a little bit. And then once those documents are received, EDA will then review DEP's recommendation. And actually, I think this number has been changed to 500,000. So if the recommendation is over 500,000, it will go to board approval. Otherwise, it can just be, it doesn't require board approval. And the EDA board meeting is usually the second Tuesday or Wednesday of the month, and you can listen to them. Then the grant will be closed on, and then funds may be dispersed to the applicant during closing or after closing. Next, please. So these are the public entity grants that are available through the HDSRF. Our preliminary assessment, site investigation, and remedial investigation grant all pays 100% of those phases. In general, those funds are dispersed upfront to the applicant prior to the work taking place. And we will require a work product and invoices after the work is completed, because we do like to see that the money was spent on the work that was approved. Next, please. There are also remedial action grants or remediation grants available to public entities. All of our remedial action grants are matching grants and can fund remedial action from 25% to 75% based on end use. To close on these remedial action grants, EDA does need to know some information. For example, how will the match be paid? They can be paid through bonds. We see a lot of people using EPA grants as a match. Maybe there's a developer contribution. That is something that does need to be known. For remedial action, unlike the assessment and investigation, funds are always dispersed after the work has been completed based on a review of invoices. So the grant would get approved, the funds will be sitting in the HDSRF grant, the invoices are submitted to the HDSRF coordinator, and then we can make disbursement recommendations to the EDA. And of course, we do require a work product after the remedial action is complete. And typically we do pay, we always pay reporting costs anyway, so we would expect to see a report. Next, please. So these are the remedial action grant types. And again, these are all percentage based. So there's the BDA, 75% remedial action grant. This can be for any end use. It doesn't matter what the end use is for the BDA 75% grant. That is a specific designation. These are sites where there's at least 2 brownfield sites that are contiguous and are performing remediation at the same time. There's also the renewable energy grant, where the end use would be for renewable energy. For example, maybe putting solar panels on a landfill. There's the recreation conservation grant, where the end use can be recreation, it can be parks, things like that. Affordable housing grant is exactly what it is. That pays for 50% of the remediation, where the end use is affordable housing. And one thing I want to mention about the recreation conservation grant, there would need to be a deed restriction for a deed restricted area for the recreation conservation area. The grant pays for remediation within that deed restricted area. And then the unrestricted use grant, this is actually available to public entities and private entities. And this pays for 25% of a soils remediation where an unrestricted use remedial action outcome will be issued. And I should mention, I am going to go over some of the changes that we had to our statute. The renewable energy grant, the recreation conservation grant, and the affordable housing grant all share a fund of $10 million. So there's $10 million for an entire year for all of the cities of the state of New Jersey to apply for those 3 grants. And also the unrestricted use grant, that's capped at $250,000 per project. Next, please. We also have an HDSRF loan. This funds 100% of all phases of work and is only for proposed work. So you can't come in and ask for a loan for work that's already been done. The interest rate is equal to 2 points below the federal discount rate for public entities and equal to the federal discount rate for all other applicants, but never will exceed 5% for any applicant. We don't typically see public loan applications, but it is available. And for private entities, that loan is capped at $2 million a year, and private entities are eligible to apply for $500,000 per year. Next, please. We also have the nonprofit grant, and this one is very similar to the public entity assessment and investigation grant. So this is still a pilot program with a total of $5 million, and we've just been drawing down on the $5 million since the inception of the nonprofit grant. This grant also funds 100% of assessment and investigation, and again, the same criteria as a municipal public entity grant, except for the municipal resolution. This would be a resolution that is approved by the nonprofit board. And you must demonstrate that you meet the criteria of a 501c3. Ownership is not required. Similar to the assessment and investigation grant, we need to see the type of site control that you have. Next, please. I'm going to talk about some changes to the HDSRF over the years. So in 2009, we had the Site Remediation Reform Act that changed how cases were reviewed at DEP. There was an affirmative obligation for responsible parties to remediate. And there was also the establishment of LSRPs and mandatory timeframes and the LSRP board. There's also annual remediation fees, which replaced our oversight costs. And DEP staff and OBCR staff were no longer case managers. And there was also the introduction of the Spill Act defense, which is a category that a lot of our HDSRF applications fall into. Next, please. Some more details on the Spill Act defense. So this is only for public entities. And basically, if you have acquired a property through bankruptcy, tax delinquency, abandonment, or if you have acquired a property for the purpose of redevelopment, you can gain this status. All you have to do is go to that forms library on the DEP website and submit that form to DEP to apply for that status. So not all sites in our program are eligible for this status. So for example, where the public entity is a responsible party. So even though DPW projects and landfill projects are welcome in the HDSRF program, they cannot be Spill Act defense because the town would be a responsible party in most cases for the DPW and landfill. And again, you are not subject to mandatory timeframes, and you only need to pay the annual remediation fee during years that you are remediating. And the LSRP is able to turn billing on and off, I believe. Next, please. So we had another change to the HDSRF back in 2018. This was Assembly Bill A 1954 that Governor Chris Christie signed right before he left office. This made significant cuts to the HDSRF. It eliminated our innocent party grant, it eliminated our limited restricted matching grant, and it also eliminated our innovative technology grant, and it reduced the funding caps to all of our public entity grants and our BDA cap. Next, please. Most recently, and this was Assembly Bill A 5841, which was signed into law by Governor Phil Murphy in this just this past summer. This made significant changes to our public entity grant and BDA funding caps. So our public entities can now receive up to $3 million per year, where it was previously cut to $2 million with Governor Christie's bill. So any one public entity, town, county, or redevelopment agency can get up to $3 million a year. That can be for one site or for a whole bunch of sites. Brownfield development areas can now get $5 million, which is up per year, which is up from $3 million. And this was the most significant change. So if you remember those matching grants I was talking about, the Recreation Conservation Grant, the Renewable Energy Grant, and the Affordable Housing Grant, that used to have a cap of 2.5 million, but that was increased to 10 million, which is very welcome. And again, yeah, the end uses are the recreation conservation, affordable housing, and renewable energy. Next, please. So I just want to talk about a few of our projects. Second Street Park here is ongoing, but this just shows that you know, when the HDSRF has more money to offer, you know, more funds from other sources can be leveraged. So this project just actually had their park naming this past summer. It's Borin Quinier Park. This is a 6-acre scrapyard. There was PCB contamination in the soils and concrete. I think there were some metals out there too. This is going to be a future community park along the waterfront. You can see there's a school right across the street. And HDSRF paid $2.5 million for remediation. We were able to get funds from the NRD, the Natural Resource Damages Fund, for $4.6 million, and EPA also put in $200,000. Next, please. This is one of our success stories in Carteret. This is one of our brownfield development area projects. So this just speaks to how great it is that our BDA communities can now apply for $5 million again, as opposed to $3 million. This was a former industrial facility that pressure treated lumber. And what we called the Cove area, which is where you see that marina, had gross arsenic contamination in the sediments. And we were able to pay for dredging to clean up those sediments. And HDSRF contributed $14.9 million HDSRF BDA funds in just 3 years. And that's why we were able to get this project done so quickly. Next, please. So in conclusion, the HDSRF is very well funded at this time, and we would love to have your application. And last, so unfortunately, 14 counties right now are currently unassigned because we've lost some coordinators. And that's my contact information right there. Those are my 7 counties that I oversee. And I'm happy to take questions at the end.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Looks like Rachel's busy.
Yeah.
We had a couple unassigned things, but the HDSRF I know it is well funded, and it is a very popular funding source here for communities and private sector entities as well in New Jersey. So let's moving on. I want to take another look now at the table of the funds that we're discussing and their applicability. Kind of, you can see we're starting to cover more and more of the phases of the brownfields redevelopment process, and we're also showing that there are funds available to both public and private sector. So what we're going to do now is move on to David Zimmer of the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank. And David, I believe your slide's up. There you go. You can go.
All right, Sean, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent. So can you flip to our first page? So I'm the executive director of the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, which is a state financing authority that works with both the DEP and the DOT within the state to administer loan programs. And you can see by the slide that's up, we'll focus on the water side and our partnership with DEP for this presentation, but we get funding, the programs that we co-jointly administer with the DEP and the DOT get funding from either the state or the state and the federal level to make discounted loans to mostly local communities, local government units, municipalities, counties, utilities, authorities, et cetera. But we do on occasion make loans to private entities, and I'll get into this because a lot of those loans end up being remediation loans. So next slide, please. Just a little bit about the Infrastructure Bank. Whoops, gotta go back one, there you go. So we were established in 1985 to work with the DEP to administer what was then the new, it used to be the old water grant, wastewater grant program, and then it became the state revolving fund. So instead of just giving out funds for grants and having those funds disappear, the money gets gets repaid and lent out again every single year. And the state now has over $3 billion of funds that it puts out. And again, this is the partnership, the 35-year partnership that the IBank has had with the DEP. We put those funds out every single year as the repayments come back in, and we get new funds from EPA for this program. Just some quick numbers for you. In the past 30 odd years with the DEP, I'm going to turn my camera off here so you guys can focus on the specifically on the slides. We have made over $9 billion in project loans. That's long-term and short-term loans. In the past 5 or 6 years, roughly 400 million of that has gone towards redevelopment projects. We lend a combination of AAA funds and 0% interest rate funds in our loans so that the effective rate for our borrowers in the past has been certainly below 2%. And we've actually even recently been, somewhere around 0.5% to 0.75%. We estimate that if people had AAA ratings like our program does, we have saved over $2.8 billion in interest savings. Of course, most of our borrowers are single A or low AA rated, so they would have to borrow at slightly higher rates, meaning the net savings that this program has produced for the local communities is well north of $3 billion. Next page. Okay, so the actual financing program itself, right now, we do make redevelopment loans for both public and private entities, and we've done a couple of them in the past. Sometimes the community will come in and borrow the funds directly from us. Sometimes they will borrow it on behalf of a redeveloper. It is important to know the difference between the two, because if it is a community loan, and right now we're doing a redevelopment project with, well, we're looking to do a redevelopment project within the next 2 months. We've gone through all the review process for East Orange. That is going to be a community loan, and they will get very favorable rating. They'll get 75% of their funds at 0% interest. For the typical redevelopment project, where the community is going to borrow the funds on behalf of the redeveloper, the program makes a loan package available for 75% comes from our bond proceeds at a AAA interest rate, and 25% comes at 0% rate. We just did a bond deal about 2.5 weeks ago. And if we had a redevelopment project in that bond deal, the redeveloper would have gotten pass-through rate all in, and that includes all the fees for the program, for the underwriters, et cetera, would have been 2.13%. You hear a lot of programs offer funds out at 2%. At times there are, caps on those programs. We're not afraid of size. Our average loan size is roughly between $4 to $5 million. We've got a number of loans that we make every single year that are well north of $50 million. This loan that I'm talking about with East Orange that we're looking at closing sometime within the next 2 months will be $15 million. So again, size does not scare us. Certainly when we make loans with that, at that kind of size, there are a lot of negotiations that we have with the local entity to make sure that they're protected when they're passing those funds through to the redeveloper, and it's a shell corporation, an LLC, to make sure that the local community has enough protections and enough collateral from the local redeveloper to secure the loan that we're making. There are fees involved in our program. There's a 2% review fee for the Department of Environmental Protection's technical folks, they're engineers. And then there is a 0.15% annual servicing charge that the iBank charges to service the fee on long-term financing. We do not, I'll get into it in 1 second. We don't necessarily provide long-term funds up front. We break the program up into a short-term construction loan program. And then once construction's complete, we convert that short-term loan program to a long-term loan and finance it, like I said here, with a combination of state funds at 0% and bond proceeds at our AAA rate. The construction loan program allows folks a lot of flexibility. As anybody that's been involved in construction knows, you make plans and then you break open the ground, and what you thought you're going to have to deal with never ends up being what you end up having to deal with. There are a number of times where we end up getting change orders, cost increases, et cetera. Fairly difficult to administer a program if you've got proceeds that you provided with long-term bonds. There's covenants in those long-term bonds. It makes it very difficult for you to change your loan program. So again, we've got a short-term construction loan program that really provides our borrowers a lot of flexibility in terms of what they need and how to address that. Next slide, please. So this is why the program has been such a success and it is so popular on average. And this number is relatively low, given that rates are low right now. So when you get funds from the state, the DEP at 0%, and the borrowing rate is 2.5% to 3%, you're only saving 2.5% to 3%. Back in the day when rates were more likely 5%, you would save twice as much money because rates were twice as high, right? But I would tell you right now, for our average borrower that's single A rated on a 30-year loan, they're pushing savings of roughly 20%. And again, that assumes that this is our typical borrower with an A or an A2 rating from Moody's. Another thing is that in order to keep costs low, we pool all of our borrowers into one bond deal. So instead of somebody going out and issuing a bond deal that might be, let's say 6 million or 10 million, and maybe instead of doing a bond deal, they do a loan, a direct loan with a bank. And, there's certainly fees involved in doing that. What happens is we'll do pools that are $100 million in size, give or take. And so what we end up paying for the rating agencies, for the underwriters, for the trustees, it's a pro rata share of that cost. And there is savings in size, right? So our borrowers end up paying just a portion of the underwriting and deal execution costs. So again, it keeps the net capital cost relatively low for them. From a cash flow savings, when you go to borrow funds and you do a bond deal, you typically have to go to LFB and get approval for that. And they require that 5% be put up front from each of the communities on the total amount that's borrowed. There is an exception in the local public bond law for the iBanks program specifically, since we lend 100% of the funds, that 5% fee is waived. In addition to that, from a cash flow perspective, we do not require on our short-term loan program any repayments of principal or interest. So a lot of times we've got folks that are just doing blocking and tackling with replacing pipes, right? Or they're extending the sewer service area. And you can't really collect and charge people for that service until that service comes online, right? So if it takes 3 years to build that project out and you have to pay debt service back to a program or a bank or a bond issuer, right? You're putting money out on your budget and you're not collecting servicing fees back from your sewer or water rate holders. The program does not differentiate between whether it is a clean water project, a drinking water project, a redevelopment project. The program's the program. We don't require repayments during construction. So this is, just another benefit of the way that we've structured our program. You don't repay us until we put you into long-term financing, and we don't put you into long-term financing until your construction's done. So there's typically 2 years for planning and design, your engineering, your environmental, et cetera. Once you get approval to start construction, the clock starts ticking. You get 3 full fiscal years from that point. We have a number of borrowers that wait until July or August to actually close on a long-term contract, a construction contract with us. So that gives them not just 3 years, but the additional 10 months of the 4th year, right? So we'll have a number of borrowers that actually stretch that out to a, call it a 46-month loan, plus the 2 years for planning and design. So again, just a lot of flexibility during the construction phase of projects that are funded through this program. Next slide, please. All right. So the requirements, and this really comes from where we get our funds from. The program gets its funds on the water side from the federal state revolving fund program. Those funds are appropriated through the state to the Department of Environmental Protection. When that appropriation goes through, it carries with it the requirements of the federal laws, the Safe Drinking Water Act or the Clean Water Act. And both of those laws predominantly require that we lend these funds to public entities. There are exceptions for private entities. So if you have, for example, on the drinking water side, a PWSID, think of New Jersey American, Middlesex Water, Suez, right? Investor-owned utilities. They all have PWSIDs. We are allowed through the law to make loans to them. On the clean water side, it's much more restrictive, especially when you get into Section 212, which is the physical infrastructure, the pipes, the stormwater drains, et cetera. But on stormwater management, it gives us a little more flexibility. So typically when we do a redevelopment project with remediation, we end up making a conduit loan. And a conduit loan is we make a loan to a local government unit, a municipality or county. And then that municipality and county in turn has a redevelopment agreement, and they make those loan funds available as a loan to the redeveloper. We get very involved in the agreement that they have, again, to make sure that the local municipality is protected in terms of collateral. But those conduit loans are a way for us to take program funds and get them into the private sector. In order to do that, we end up getting the municipalities buy-in up front because they're going to give us a general obligation pledge, right? They're going to put their tax base on the line as a guarantee to repay the loan that we make to them. So I'll go back to the East Orange example. If and when we close this loan, possibly in another 2 months for $15 million, we will get a GO from the city of East Orange. Right. I won't get into the details on it. There's some, some really interesting ways that we're working with East Orange to help them with this. But again, we're lending the funds to East Orange. East Orange is going to turn around and do the work directly on behalf of the redevelopment project to make sure that the redevelopment project is viable, right? It's, if you will, their investment to get this very, very large project that's going to be known as the Brick Church Project up and running. We did one with Newark in the, it was the old Sherwin-Williams building, right? And I think it was Morris Companies came in. We lent $18 million to the city of Newark. Newark turned around and lent that $18 million for total remediation work for the site and got a pilot agreement with the redeveloper, with the Morris Companies, to repay them back. And now, you pass that on the train when you're going up and it's along the Passaic River there. It's a beautiful warehouse, right? It's no longer dark. It's a great rateable. There's, more than 100 local jobs. And a huge part of that financing came for the remediation that this program provided through the city of Newark. Another benefit of the conduit loans, if you're working with a redeveloper, is they get to take advantage of the redevelopment law exclusion. And I think it's section GG, don't quote me on that, but from private contracting, right? So we're a public program, we have public funds, you have to follow local public contract laws, which usually means public bid and low bid wins. When we're working with or through a redeveloper, the exclusion assumes that the redeveloper is putting equity in, and they are going to, since it's their, the costs are going to impact their profit, that they have the profit motive and will react responsibly. So again, just another small benefit that redevelopers or redevelopment projects get when they're dealing with our program. Next slide, please. So what are some of the types of projects that we will do? And, really, when you focus on site remediation, all of the projects on the clean water side of our program have to have a water quality benefit. And we can get pretty creative in terms of defining what a water quality benefit is. But some of the more common examples of projects are, certainly removal of contaminated soil. we do capping systems, and think industrial sites, right? We did a warehouse down in Carteret where we paid for the capping of a site, clay capping of a site. And I believe that site right now is where the Amazon warehouse is, right? A very, very successful project for the city of Carteret. Capping systems. We also do liners, right? And liners, you think landfills, leachate collection systems for landfills. We do tank removals. We'll finance well sealing activities. We'll finance retention walls to minimize leaching into waterways. In fact, that was one of the components of the Newark's Sherwin-Williams site. And then, of course, anything that's related or can be related to groundwater / drinking water. Very important to the program. Next slide. I think this is an example. Right. So here's a case study that we did. And the reason I chose this case study, we did this in 2019 because it was a joint funded project with DEP's HDSRF program that is jointly run with EDA. So you've got all three of us on the line here. And this was a project that all three of us were involved in. It's a 47-acre site in Somerville. Anybody that's driven up along the Parkway on 206, and it's across from the Doris Duke estate, you can see it. It used to be a very, very large municipal landfill. It was closed in '82. Obviously, like most landfills, there were a lot of heavy metals and pollutants in it. There used to be a stream that had been closed. It was designated a brownfield development area in 2009. And the folks in Somerville worked very, very closely with the state in trying to turn this site into something as the borough of Somerville was growing into something that they could utilize as rateable space. So we came in and we helped them remediate a portion, basically 25%, 20 to 25% of the project site, as well as green lighting the stream corridor. Next slide, please. So here's the breakdown of the cost. It's actually grown to just almost $17 million in total project costs. The water bank, the partnership between the DEP and the iBank, provided roughly 25% for remediation. All in, we ended up financing that at roughly 92 basis points, 0.92%. So again, on the 25% of the project that they financed through the water bank, they got financing at less than 1%. And again, this includes all of the fees for DEP's review, for the underwriters, the trustees, et cetera. It was a direct loan to the borough, so they got slightly better financing than if we had lent the funds to the borough to pass through to the redeveloper. The total savings that we calculated on that $4.2 million was $358,000, or about 10%. And the reason why it's a little bit lower, rates were very, very low back then. I think our net rate without cost was just a little bit more than 0.5%, and then there was roughly 0.4% in fees. So, and again, that assumes that Somerville was AAA rated, which they're not. So the savings was really probably more closer to $500,000. The remaining, like I said, the remaining $12 million in financing came from DEP's HDSRF program that they run jointly with the EDA. All right, next slide. Okay, so this was just a little bit more about the project. It is a transit-oriented redevelopment site. It is the Holmesdale development. Its total was $300 million. Obviously, the $16 million to remediate and plan the site, while it might just have been 5% of the total cost, was critical in order to move forward with the development of the housing complexes, right? 174 condos, townhouses, more than 340 condos. And again, it's within, anybody that's been up there, it's within 5 minutes. It's right across from the train station. It's within 5 minutes walk of downtown Somerville, which is a very cool little city. And throughout it, there's biking trails and biking trails and walking trails. And again, they've green lighted that stream, which was a big part of the project for us. As far as social benefits go, next page, please. Right. So, what did we end up doing? Right. We ended up preventing runoff and leachate from going into the stream that we green lighted. We further prevented contamination into the Raritan River, which I believe is where the stream ends up running into. We restored wetlands, and then of course the project itself is just a beautiful residential area with recreational benefits, bike pass, walk pass, and again, your 5-minute walk into downtown Somerville. It's really just north. It's at the north end of the borough. So that kind of gives you an example of what we do and how we can interact, not just with local communities and redevelopers in those communities, but also how the water bank, the DEP and the I-Bank can also work with other agencies in the state, like EDA. There's some other folks that we work with. So we'll work with Green Acres. We've done redevelopment deals with Green Acres and conservation projects. So to put it, very succinctly, if you've got a remediation project, whether it's for the town directly or it's for a redeveloper, and again, it really doesn't matter the size of the deal. One of the pieces of the capital stack that you should certainly be considering is the water bank. You should make sure that you touch base with us. Thanks, Sean.
All righty, great. Thank you, David. And great examples of how the water bank can be brought to bear on Brownfields projects, which is extremely helpful to see that. So again, back to our table that gives you an overview. So we've covered quite a few sources of funding for Brownfields projects. You can see here how they can be applied. And again, this is, like I mentioned earlier, Brownfields projects are funded by multiple sources. So these are just a few, but you can see that they do cover quite an expanse of the phases of the Brownfields redevelopment project. I just want to also make a note that for EDA's Brownfield Impact Fund, what's in their public sector, private sector column should be transverse. They should be the other way around. So it's public sector is for loans and or sub grants, and for private sector is loans only. So just wanted to make that clarification, and I will fix that before I post this to our website. Again, we're going to put this presentation up on the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center's website, and you'll be able to find it under the resources tab. So what I'd like to do now is move to the Q&A portion of the webinar. I'm going to go through, again, if you have any questions, put them into the Q&A pane. I'm going to go through them and I'll direct them to who I believe would be the person to answer them. So let me get my camera on. Okay, so the first question is, I believe, for Melissa, and it's what does a for-profit redeveloper need to show for their Brownfield Impact Fund / US EPA RLF application with regard to their financials?
Okay, very specific question, but that is going to be on the application. So we are going to release that shortly. We're developing that right now. So we'll have a list of required documents, financial documents that need to be submitted, along with other different documents. So that is under development and forthcoming. So go to the website that I put in the chat. Check that as we get closer to January 2022, and that will all be there for you.
Okay, next question is there, and I'm not sure who would want to jump out at this one, is there any program that doesn't require prevailing wage and a 20% affordable residential component? This basically causes most suburban development projects to not be economically feasible.
The HDSRF does, we don't require prevailing wage.
Okay.
So yeah, so one thing I just did want to say on prevailing wage, like I understand I worked in the private sector before working here at EDA, but one thing that we just, we want to remember here is that prevailing wage is an important way to safeguard workers, their well-being, protect them as well as their employers from unfair working conditions and competition. So I understand about prevailing wage, and it is why I wanted to highlight it in the beginning, so people understand before they come in for the program, so we don't get too far along with the application or with the review, and then the prevailing wage issue comes up. So that's what I wanted just to say about that.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to add? David, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'll just say that the water bank certainly doesn't require the residential component.
Okay, great. Next question. I believe this is Rachel. For a site investigation cost estimate, does the Office of Brownfield Redevelopment need to see and review the preliminary assessment?
Typically, we would want to see a preliminary assessment. Yes. If we have a site investigation proposal, we want to know that there was some kind of documentation of how you arrived at going ahead and investigating those areas of concern. So it's something that we might, even if you feel like you are at the site investigation phase, we might require a preliminary assessment.
Okay. Rachel, we have another one for you. Is the renewable energy grant available to the municipality or the redeveloper or both? Typically, the municipality would not be conducting the remedial action, as the redeveloper would have taken control of the site for construction of the engineering controls / landfill cap.
Yes, so for our remedial action grants for public entities, please note that the applicant is the recipient of the grant, and the applicant for HCSRF is always a public entity, but the public entity is not required to own the property during the remedial action phase. And we understand that there may be a redeveloper involved for any of our grants, not just the renewable energy. So typically there might be a remediation management agreement or some kind of contract of sale agreement that we might need to take a look at that, and just so we understand the conditions and responsibilities of the developer and the municipality, but that's fine.
Okay, another one for you, Rachel. You mentioned BDAs and planning areas 1 and 2. Can you please explain what those are?
So brownfield development areas, we started our brownfield development area program back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. So I don't know the exact number of brownfield development area sites that brownfield development areas that we have in the brownfields office, but essentially these are towns that applied to have an actual brownfield development area in their town. And again, these are sites that have at least 2 brownfield sites that are next to each other that are performing remediation at the same time. And again, that's a designation, and there was an application process years ago. We have been having discussions. Nothing is set in stone yet, but we've been talking about opening the whole process up again so that we can have some new brownfield development areas. And some of the perks of the brownfield development area is that you have someone in the brownfields office that is your designated contact to help you finagle things like permits and any issues that you might have in the department. And then also you are eligible for additional funding. You can get $5 million a year for remedial action, as opposed to up to $3 million. And planning area 1 and 2, I don't know the exact definition, but that's essentially, it's almost our entire universe of HDSRF.
Okay, and another one for Rachel. Can you expand on the RP's eligibility for HDSRF?
So if you are a responsible party, you are eligible for our HDSRF loan or our unrestricted matching grant, which is a soils remediation. Again, I did mention DPWs and landfills. You are able to apply for public entity grants for those.
Great. Well, that was our last question. I just want to, oh, wait, hold on. Oh, okay, yeah, that's the last one. If do any of the panels, do you have any, parting thoughts, anything you'd like to add? You don't have to feel compelled to do so. I'm just putting it out there. If you had any parting words that you wanted to share.
No, I just want to thank you, Sean, and the Brownfields Assistance Center for putting this on. I think it's really important information for people to understand different resources, different ways they can pair things together, what covers what activities. So thanks everyone for having me, and I hope to hear from
Thank
you.
you for participating. Anybody
Yeah.
else?
Mhm.
Okay, so I just wanted to put up everybody's contact information. If you had a question, you can always, my questions always come when I'm driving home. So if you have any questions, here's everybody's contact information. You can feel free to reach out to them. If you require any assistance, again, the New Jersey Brownfield Assistance Center is here. We provide free assistance to communities that are pursuing brownfields assessment, cleanup, and redevelopment. So reach out to us. Our assistance goes well beyond just funding. Of course, we can help you identify funding and help you work through some of these programs. But there's a lot of other things brownfields related that we can assist you with. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the panelists. Great presentations, like Melissa stated. Having this information in front of you, a lot of this funding can feel like a moving target, and there's a lot of funding that can be drawn upon that people aren't aware of. So having this up in front of them, I think is great. I'd like to thank all the participants for taking the time and spending it with us. So everybody have a happy and a healthy holiday, and I'll close the webinar. Take care.
Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome. Thank you.